Inventory. Oh, inventory is the most challenging aspect of IT expense management, and it's a bugaboo that I've always been driven nuts by. Hi, I'm Hyun Park, and I'm here from Amalgam Insights to talk about building inventory, the eternal struggle for truth. And I find this concept really difficult, especially because we have just spent the last 3 months dealing with one impact after another, COVID, recession, all the challenges that we're dealing with right now. And, in the past 3 months, it means we've been buying IT in a lot of different ways through a lot of different sources, reallocating resources and going around all of the processes that we've typically had in corporate environments. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what this means in terms of telecom, mobility, software as a service, as well as infrastructure as a service. Just as a reminder, this webinar is a precursor to the event that we will be holding on July 14th, TEM Expo. For those of you watching, we have links in the attachment under this screen that shows both the slides as well as a link to the event itself. I'd love to see you there. We're going to be going over this topic and many others in much more detail. Right now we have 10 sessions scheduled for TEM Expo across cloud, SaaS, infrastructure and management. We've just announced our first 6 speakers. It's going to be a great event. Please sign up. We've got gift boxes for all the attendees, as well as we'll be making a donation to Feeding America for every attendee that shows up. So everything, we're going to be giving you lots of opportunities to meet with your peers and with the experts and the speakers at this event. So we're looking forward to seeing you there. And thank you to our premier sponsor, MobiCord, our first sponsor, who has provided us with, frankly, both the backing and the opportunity to put this event in place. Of course, we always want more sponsors. We're actually going to be adding $10 per attendee for each sponsor that comes in to Feeding America. So the more sponsors we get, the more we donate. So thanks so much to MobiCord for your initial support for us. So to give us a little context on why we're talking about inventory, it's been tough. 43 million Americans have filed for unemployment claims since mid-March, and that's led to obviously the current recession that we're in. We're estimating that about 3/4 of enterprise departments have frozen their IT budgets. Ironically, that's not good enough because a lot of what seems to have happened is that people have gone around their IT departments, or there's been special dispensations for purchasing technology that have gone around these freezes. So there ends up being a lot of new inventory that has been created, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And of course, with these challenges, cash flow management is right now the key metric. Right now, how much cash can you save in the next month or two? Even if your balance sheet, your assets, and the amount of money you have under management seems good on paper, you need actual cash right now, and that has been part of what's been driving a lot of these layoffs, frankly, and in these employment issues. Just that companies aren't sure how much cash they have over the next few months. And anything you can do to pull back cash is going to be imperative. And IT is an opportunity to actually be able to support some of those cash management issues by looking in the right places and managing some of these inventories better. Because after all, what good does it do if we've had these freezes, we talk about how important cash flow is, but we're not actually managing the new COVID-based IT spend, the networking, the cloud spending, the communications, everybody's talking about Zoom, and of course all their competitors, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've got to manage all that as well, and this is the time to start doing it. As you guys know, if you've been listening to these webinars from the beginning, back in mid-April, I talked about the 6 stages of managing COVID IT and how basically for the past couple of months, we've been in these stages 2 and 3 of securing your business and auditing your environment, because these were the past 2 months that were critical for cleaning up the mess that is being created if you're going to be saving money over the rest of the year. So that's why we've been doing webinar after webinar after webinar. You know, this is the 10th webinar we've done over the past couple of months. I hope these have been helpful. And of course, these are leading up to our one-day event on July 14th, where we'll be going over even more of these topics to provide guidance to your organization. So we've been creating all of these frameworks that we'll be going over at the event itself. Again, these are in prior webinars that we've gone over. But today we're talking about managing your inventory. And when we talk about inventory, I like to think about the kind of 8 aspects of managing your inventory: centralizing your service orders, aligning your service orders to your inventory, categorizing and tagging your inventory, discover what is missing, tracking all aspects of your inventory features, tracking usage and login for all assets and services, cross-checking your invoices with inventory, and then prioritizing contracts based on your inventory portfolio. So you can tell just by looking at this, when I'm looking at it, thinking about inventory, inventory is a building block to also talk about services, also talking about invoices, also talking about contracts. It is a bedrock of your expense management efforts. And without great inventory, it's really hard to manage the rest of this. So when I talk about centralizing your service orders as a starting point, you don't know what you've got unless you have an idea of what has been ordered. And this sounds so straightforward to companies that have a top-down enterprise IT structure, but here's the reality. With mobility, with cloud, with bring your own, everything transfers from individual liable to corporate liable and back again, and all of the compromises that we've been making as work from home employees, service orders, or really ordering IT services of any type, has become very decentralized. So what's this mean? You know, from a practical perspective, what are service orders right now? Cat herding. For those of you who are old, remember 20 years ago, one of the greatest Super Bowl advertisements of all time, done by EDS, talked about how cat herding is probably one of the hardest things I've ever done. It had these, these cowboys coming over and just herding cats, and you know that is what help time I see that commercial, even all this time later, decades later, I always can't help but think about that in terms of IT, the service order challenges we have, and how it's not just a matter of the volume of service orders, but the number of people who are able to place these orders. Now, anybody with a credit card and a corporate email can now basically mess up your service order and provide you with a nice little surprise that you don't find out until later, unless you have some way of being able to track down the people who are placing these orders. So again, one of these big challenges is just around managing the service orders. Next up, thinking about aligning service orders to inventory and categorizing and tagging inventory. I think it's really important to figure out, did the service order actually get completed? That sounds so basic, but amazingly enough, typically 1% to 2% of orders don't get completed as provided. And there's all sorts of reasons for this. Operational systems, billing systems get messed up, or things get lost in translation. Accounts get messed up for licenses or for subscriptions, whatever it might be, or people just place orders incorrectly and make mistakes in their assumptions of what they think they ordered versus what they actually ordered. And then you have to actually assign what has been ordered from a service perspective to the actual business. And when I think about those assignments, there's a lot of different sources for that type of thing. It could be HR systems, it could be Microsoft Active Directory, or your email system, or however you categorize that. Your general ledger to deal with your cost centers, your profit centers, single sign-on services, IT asset and service management, project management if you're assigning your services to specific projects, as well as cloud management and governance solutions. All of these systems integrations need to be linked to your inventory in a way that makes sense, whether it's through direct data definitions or through more informal tagging, depending on the types of services that you're managing. These system integrations, by having it through has some sort of integration rather than simply tracking manually, they will help you to align inventory changes to employee and project changes. So for instance, if an employee leaves your company, the kind of the standard example, you want to make sure that every service associated with that employee is either cut off or is assigned to a manager or a replacement or another stakeholder immediately. Otherwise, you get stuck with what we call zombie services, these things that are just hanging around, driving up costs without ever being used, and that are completely ignored and outside of everybody's purview. So obviously a challenge. One of the other things is I come from a telecom background, and I think of telecom billing as challenging in terms of the systems that we use, the management that is necessary, and network and telecom are difficult, mobility is difficult. But when you look at cloud, cloud gets even worse. Here is just a quick view of Amazon Web Service management and governance services. And this provides you with an idea of what you need for governance control, resources, operating your environment. And we're just talking about everything from cost usage, cost explorer, cloud formation, control tower, license manager, budget. You're looking at, what is this? I don't know, about 16 tools right here for AWS. And then for Azure, it doesn't get much better. These are just the configuration tools associated with the inventory of services that you might have. So cloud is also this big mess. And I think that's a big opportunity as well. Whether we're calling this cloud cost management or FinOps or financial operations for cloud services, this is an area that is going to require a lot of help because it's just as messy, possibly even messier than telecom. It definitely has as much data or more than telecom. And so I think this is a huge opportunity to be able to figure out what the heck is going on from an inventory perspective, especially since it can get messed up so easily. So just a note there. Next challenge in inventory is to discover what is missing. It sounds like a Zen koan. Discover what is missing. Embrace nothingness. What is that? But seriously, this is a huge challenge. To understand inventory, you have to understand who is creating the inventory and how to get in touch with those people. As I talked about before, anybody with a credit card, anybody with an employee ID can now place orders. So how do you discover what is missing? You start having to think about not just what you're supporting, but the roles that would order the stuff that you are supporting. And then you have to start to get to know them. The inventory is a team effort. Inventory is not just a matter of being the best accountant or being the best data person. You have to actually go out and talk to the people who are in the roles that are most important to your services, and knowing why they're ordering telecom or why they're ordering cell phones, why they're ordering cloud services, why they're ordering SaaS applications, why they are adding to your budget at a time when we are trying to manage cash really tightly. And there might be good reasons. I'm not saying that you should cut off people's productivity. I'm just saying that you need to understand who are your key stakeholders in terms of purchasing what is in what technology, as well as discovering what is missing from your centralized environment. Next up, you have to track all aspects of inventory features. So it's not enough just to know that you've ordered, say, a phone line or a cloud service or an application. You have to know which aspects of and which features are associated with that inventory. One of my favorite examples is, of course, again, I come from a telecom background. So what we're looking at here is a telecom customer service record. When you order a typical phone line, this is what it looks like on the back end. And for those of you who understand these universal service order codes and feature IDs, you're going to see some familiar things such as your local number portability and your, you can see down at the bottom, there's an LPIC and a PIC, basically assigning your long distance and local long distance providers, just things like that. But each one of these codes means something in terms of being a feature that has been turned on or turned off and being assigned to a specific phone number. And this is the core starting point for the inventory. I find this to be the most challenging aspect of inventory from an IT perspective, because both mobility and cloud services, as challenging as they both are, tend to have more plain language definitions, whereas these USOCs and feature IDs really are quite opaque and require some specialization. It's why you have to dig deep to understand what is going on with inventory across all IT departments and categories, but telecom especially has its own special language that requires a lot of attention and technical understanding to know what's going on. Next up, looking at tracking usage and logins for all assets and services. So obviously you don't want zombie services. You want services that work for you and that are actually being used on a day-to-day basis. So we just talked about telecom. Now I'm going to bounce back to cloud usage. And as you can see here, this is just a kind of a random example of Amazon Web Services usage. You can see there's a lot of detail, and that the charges go down far beyond the cent to tenth of a cent, hundredth of a cent, thousandth of a cent, millionth of a cent for all of these services that are coming up time after time again. And it's like call accounting on steroids. Again, for those of you with a phone background, that there's or for those of you with a mobility background, think about how this, if your data flows where it had this level of detail on what was coming in, what was going out. That's basically what happens at this level. Cloud usage detail is definitely the most detailed information that you get in the IT world. And it's important to know how that usage aligns to your inventory, as well as to know if there are any specific services that are underutilized or not utilized, especially as there's been so much flux in the work world. So after that, let's look at cross-charging invoices with inventory. So I think thinking about each service, obviously you want to make sure that invoices match up with the inventory that you have tracked down, both by looking at service orders as well as finding people and figuring out what is going on. But when you look at each spend category, they're a bit different in what you expect from matching invoices and inventory. In the telecom world, we find that roughly 80% of telecom bills have at least one or more errors. And it's tough to get that right because they have so many decades of legacy code, and marketing always likes to create new bundles and offerings, and that creates a lot of challenges for these ancient systems. Back in the day, I used to manage a number of these systems myself, and I remember just how challenging it was to keep up with marketing's ideas on a month-to-month basis. And just to track the discounts and all of that. So it leads to a lot of opportunities for things to break. And in telecom, it does. In public cloud, you don't see the same types of errors in terms of inventory versus invoice, but what you do find is a lot of opportunities for surprises as people place orders outside of your purview and they somehow end up on your master account without your being able to really do much about it. The goal, the plus side of cloud is agility, but the minus is the lack of governance that often is involved. And then on the right side, you see with software as a service, you have to watch out for tiers and constant service changes. Again, now with software as a service, there's a lot of agility on the service and offering side as well that is hard to keep track of. It's very easy for these types of companies, SaaS companies, to just change the offerings on the fly. $10 plan might be a $50 plan the next day. $50 plan might be a $10 plan, and the features and capabilities associated with them change all the time because they are very flexible in their go-to-market offerings, and there's no standardization across SaaS vendors because why would they work together when that would help you? So lots of challenges in looking at invoices and inventory that are different between IT categories. And then next, just thinking about how we should deal with prioritizing contracts based on inventory portfolio. So, there's I think it's really important for those who are managing inventory to talk to sourcing and procurement and have a good relationship with them because your jobs are in alignment, but separate jobs. Those who are working in sourcing and procurement typically lack the subject matter knowledge to understand how to track inventory on a real-time or near real-time basis. And at the same time, if you're tracking inventory, you do not want to be spending all of your time negotiating contracts. And there are a few people who have both skills, but I tend to find that the skills to manage in inventory to the nth degree are not exactly the same skills that are used for effectively negotiating. That said, there are definitely better practices for bringing in inventory and procurement together. It's easy for procurement to simply get a 5 or 10% across the board discount and call it a day and declare victory. But those of us who have inventory knowledge know that there are challenges in simply taking that route. But there may be opportunities to cut specific areas by 80 or 90% by a combination of cutting services or replacing services, obsolete services with newer services, and having an idea of where to actually do that. So it's important to be able to work with them and understand how to give them an up-to-date inventory to show where they should prioritize their negotiations and how to target their price discussions, and then how to use the trends, month-to-month, quarter-to-quarter trends in the inventory to be able to negotiate better rates and services. So with that, I've got a few recommendations for you based on what we've been discussing here. First of all, let's look at, don't do everything at once. In each IT subcategory, figure out which stage you're really in, especially in this COVID environment where things have just changed. We've just had 3 months of massive change in at least one or more areas of these IT subcategories if you're dealing with the standard challenges that are here. And so when you think about these prepare, herd cats, and optimize, this is roughly how I break it down. The preparation part is for those who may not have had a great inventory to start with. This is a time to centralize service orders, align service orders to inventory, categorize and tag inventory, figure out your base of what is working, what is not, and how to be able to track it. For those of you who are at this intermediate stage, you probably have to do some discovery and understand how things changed over the past couple of months. This is the time to do it because you're about to get ready for contract renewals. You need to make some cases for cash management changes, perhaps some difficult discussions with your vendors, depending on what your cash situation is right now. You may be getting demands from your CFO or your chief accounting officer or your controller to manage cash in a way that is non-traditional in this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, recession, whatever this is that we're in. For those of you who have got this cleaned up, it's time to prepare for contracts, which is at the bottom part, and prioritizing contract negotiations and terms based on your inventory portfolio. Next up, dig deep into the details and build what you need. So this is a difficult discussion sometimes to have with IT, across IT, procurement, legal, finance, who all assume that expense management is expense management and inventory is inventory, and all this is the same. This is an area where it helps for you to be able to present to the rest of your team and to your stakeholders about what the details really mean. So, we talked about how sometimes you'll have the details, but they'll be opaque and difficult to understand, such as the customer service records on the left. Sometimes you'll have the details, but they are so overwhelming that you need some sort of data or analytics strategy or some sort of software platform to be able to help you out, such as with the Amazon Web Services detail on the upper right. And sometimes you have the opposite problem on the bottom right. This is a Office 365 bill where they are notorious for the lack of detail that's provided. You actually need a separate system to basically track your licenses, because all they'll tell you is that you have 100 licenses. That's great, but that doesn't really tell you who's got what, how that's changing on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month basis. Microsoft doesn't care about any of that. All they care about is whether you're buying more or not. So that's really difficult and challenging and frustrating for those of us who actually care about doing IT inventories correctly. And then finally, my biggest takeaway here: inventory is not a standalone capability. Don't try to do it all yourself. The most important thing you can do for having a great inventory is to figure out who you're working with and to keep in touch with them. This is time to figure out who has been making these orders, how is your ordering and your inventory fundamentally changed, who are the people you need to be talking to and keeping in touch with on a weekly or monthly basis to make sure that things haven't broken, or if they've broken, how to get them back on schedule. So this is where the cross-departmental expense management team really comes in. So it's easy to think about IT and finance, but also procurement, also operations. If you're dealing with SaaS, obviously, sales operations and marketing operations end up being really important, because those technology portfolios have just exploded over the past few years. It's important to know who you need to work with across each of these areas, and to understand that if you're taking on new spend categories, that you're going to have new stakeholders that may not be exactly the same as what you were dealing with before. Just because you dealt with network doesn't mean you have the exact same people in from a cloud perspective. Just because you were dealing with mobility doesn't mean that your SaaS stakeholders are the same, et cetera. So learn each spend subcategory and understand who you need to talk to. And with that, thank you so much for this joining me on this quick hit. We'll be going into this topic and many more over at TEM Expo 2020 on July 14th. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. Again, there should be a link in the attachments tab under the screen so that you can both sign up for the event as well as take a look at these slides. If you have any questions about any of these slides or this topic, please get in contact with us. We will be having an inventory-specific session at TEM Expo. Where we'll get to dig into more detail. I'm excited about that. This was just setting the stage for what is to come. And with that, thank you so much for showing up today, and I am looking forward to seeing you at TEM Expo.